This is North Texas Weather Center with your latest 4-minute forecast going over all that severe weather potential for both today and tomorrow. Here's a look at today's threat. As of right now, we have a slight risk for severe weather across the central and as well as southern plains. It's a pretty large area today. The main threats today will be damaging winds, large hail, and potentially a tornado or two will be possible. Again, that slight risk extends from southern Nebraska all the way into almost all of Oklahoma. So we have a very large portion, again, of the central and southern plains being included in that. Main threat for damaging winds today, and this is the excessive potential for 80-mile-per-hour damaging winds and a storm or two, will exist anywhere in the Texas Panhandle and western Oklahoma, and as well as through central and southern portions of Kansas. So again, damaging winds possibly up to 80 to maybe even a little bit higher than that, 85 miles per hour, may occur with a storm or two this evening. Here's a look at the tornado threat as of right now. Main threat will be across southern and central Nebraska into northern Kansas. Again, that's been our area that we've been watching the last several days anyways for that tornado threat, so it's a fairly similar area that's already been hit by many storms over the last few days. Here's a look at the hail threat. Again, the main hail threat in terms of at least baseball plus sized hail, this could go as high as tennis balls or even greater than that, will be in this area here. So southern Nebraska into northern and central Kansas. Anywhere else, primarily looking at golf ball sized hail or less and a few storms. Again, it's not going to be it's basically a widely scattered, isolated event outside of that range. All right, here's a look at the timing as of right now for the central plains. Again, we'll get into the southern plains here in just a second. At 7 o'clock tonight, we'll start to see a couple of discrete cells develop out in western Kansas. Again, these will have the greatest threat for very large hail and as well as a low-end tornado threat. By about 8 to 9 o'clock, those storms will really be at their peak at that point, going between Colby and Hayes. Eventually, by about 10 o'clock or so, those storms will move through central Kansas, and eventually we'll see a little line, a broken line of storms up in southern Nebraska. This will move down to the south and bring all modes of severe weather, primarily just being damaging winds, but also low-end large hail threat. Eventually, by 2 to 3 in the morning, those storms will move into Kansas City, and eventually that'll move down into Oklahoma going into the early morning hours. Now, looking at the southern plains, areas like Oklahoma, we're going to have a different system actually set up back out to the west near Dalhart, and really anywhere in the Oklahoma Panhandle. That's where we're going to see these storms develop. So 8 to 9 o'clock, a line of storms will develop here. Again, the main threat with these will be damaging winds up to 80 to 85 miles per hour. A very low-end large hail threat exists. I'm not expecting a tornado threat with this since it'll probably be outflow driven. By 10 to 11 o'clock, that line is moving into most likely western Oklahoma and maybe even areas like Childress. Eventually by midnight to 1 in the morning, that line should start to collapse a bit, not nearly as strong as it gets toward Lawton as well as Wichita Falls, but it will still produce damaging winds up to 65 miles per hour. So that's going to be the main threat as it goes over those regions. By 3 to 4 in the morning, those storms will move through North Texas. More on that in just a second. And eventually our other line of storms moving through far eastern portions of Oklahoma near Tulsa. So those areas might see some storms tonight. Here's a look at the North Texas timing, as I said before, by about 4 in the morning, going through the DFW Metroplex, and eventually going to 7, 8 in the morning, we'll start to see those storms move into Arkansas, which will lead to our next severe weather potential for going into Friday. So we'll see a slight risk of severe weather across Arkansas as well as Louisiana, Mississippi, and western Alabama. This will be the potential for damaging winds, large hail, maybe at a low-end tornado threat as well. No significant threats expected with this, but here's the timing. So you can see going out into about 9, 10 in the morning, storms are moving through eastern Arkansas, eventually going to Mississippi, and eventually it's basically going to be an outflow-driven line of storms. So I'm not expecting much in terms of a tornado threat, but I would expect mainly damaging winds. This is going to the mid to late afternoon hours. Eventually this will plow through areas like Louisiana. Again, most likely bring some damaging winds. I'm not expecting, by the way, a derecho out of this by any means. Here's a look at the temperatures this morning across North Texas. Right now in the upper 60s and low 70s. Eventually by this afternoon, many of us warming up into the low to mid 90s. Looking at tomorrow, temperatures will be very similar, mid to upper 70s across the area. Eventually by the afternoon hours, many of us will be warming up into the upper 90s and low 100s. And by the way, I know you probably don't want to see this, but those in DFW, we're going to have a very hot week going to next week. We're talking about low to mid 100s almost every single day. So make sure you're conserving energy. Make sure that you're staying indoors enough to the point where you're not getting exhausted when you're outdoors. So make sure you're limiting outdoors time, I should say. All right, this forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting, All Dents Repair, and Patriot Safe Room.